AfriKili Nation, Happy New Year. I am so excited to connect with you for our first video of the year 2023. And so on that note, I'd like to send you my very best wishes to you and your loved ones. May 2023 be a very prosperous year for your personal affairs, your spiritual affairs, your personal relationships, and all your business matters. But also may 2023 be a year in which we advance our AfriKili mission, which is to change both the image and the destiny of the African continent for the benefit of continental Africans, the entire Pan-African diaspora, and humanity. Well, today I'd like to speak about something very interesting. In case you missed it, about a week and a half ago in France, the actor of African descent, Omar Sy, literally broke the internet. The internet was on fire. And this happened as he was giving an interview to promote his latest movie called Les Tirailleurs. Well, during the interview, he made comments relating to the Russia-Ukraine war. Comments that on the surface seemed to be innocent, but ended up causing a storm, a real volcanic eruption. And so in this video, we will address that controversy. We'll look at the history behind the movie, but we'll also look at the comments that were made. We'll analyze them on an AfriKili standpoint, and we'll also provide a way forward, some solutions, because as you know, our platform does not only seek to justify and defend, but we seek to advance. So there you have it. Let's dive in and let's get to work. Hello family, welcome to another edition of AfriKili. As a reminder, the words AfriKili is a contraction between two words, the word Africa and the word Akili, which means intelligence in Swahili, the most spoken African language in Africa. So AfriKili stands for African intelligence. If you're new to our platform, our mission is to advance and fight for change. Change to both the image, but also the destiny of the African continent. And we do that by focusing on three pillars: Pan-African history to disseminate education, Pan-African political action, and Pan-African business initiative. And we do that for the benefits of continental Africans, but also the entire Pan-African diaspora across the world and humanity. You can find out more on our blog by going to www.afrikili.com, but also by following our social media profiles on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. Well, in today's video, I want to address the controversy that erupted all over the French-speaking world's internet about a week ago. This happened as the Black French actor of African descent, Omar Sy, made comments as he was promoting his latest movie called Les Tirailleurs. By the way, the word tirailleur is a French word that can be translated as rifleman. And this is a very interesting movie because he talks about the history of African soldiers that served in the French military during the First and Second World War. Although this is a fictional history, so it's not really historical fact, the movie is fictitious characters, but it addresses a historical topic. Well, as he was promoting his movie, he was asked questions about the war in Russia, the Russia-Ukraine war. And he made comments pertaining to that, which on the surface, again, appeared to be innocent, but they caused a real volcanic eruption across France and the French-speaking world. You had politicians talking about it, and it caused a massive controversy. And so I will address that, but I'd like to address this topic in three parts. First, I want to talk a little bit about the history behind Les Tirailleurs, because as you know, one of our pillars at AfriKili is history, Pan-African history, because we believe we need to disseminate history to enlighten and bring some realities to the forefront. So I will first talk about the history, then the second part, I will discuss the controversy itself, and we'll look at some of the statements that were made. Lastly, I'll propose a way forward and some solutions, because it is important for us to mention that our platform AfriKili does not only want to justify, defend, accuse, no. We want to provide solutions and we want to advance. because we need to build a better and stronger future. All right, so let's move on to the first part and let's talk about the history behind the tirailleur itself. As I said, the word tirailleur, it translates as rifleman. Okay, so this is essentially discovers another topic which, in my opinion, is often left out of history books. And this has to do with the fact that for a very long time, the French army was recruiting soldiers to shore up its rank. And so from its colonies, and they would call those soldiers the tirailleurs. So it recruited soldiers from North Africa, West Africa, Indochina, etc. And so it was a very diverse pool of soldiers that fought for France in many different conflicts and many different wars. World War I, World War II, etc. And so in 1857, by a decree of Napoleon, a new corps of black African soldiers was created. And so they call them Senegalese Tirailleurs. Remember again, the word tirailleur means rifleman. So it was formed out of Senegal, hence the name Senegalese Tirailleurs. Well, over time, as this corps or this regiment grew, it became more diverse. So France no longer only recruited in Senegal, but included many different countries across Africa and across West Africa. But because the corps originated out of Senegal, the French just decided to keep the same name, Senegalese Tirailleurs. So in essence, this corps made of black African soldiers, although it was called Senegalese Tirailleurs, it had soldiers from many different African nations. It was a very diverse pool. And over time, from its creation until it was disbanded in the 1960s, there's an estimated about 500,000 of those soldiers, of those African soldiers, that fought for France through various wars, and many of which, tens of thousands, gave their lives for France. Although it's a fictitious movie that Omar Sy just released, so it's fictional history because the characters are all fictitious characters, but it really touches on this very important part of French history that, again, is being left out of many history books and on our educational curriculums on purpose and many times, in my opinion. And those black soldiers that had given their lives for France had never really had their rights fully recognized. They're not well recognized, but also not well remunerated over time. As a matter of fact, some of those soldiers even were shot simply for the fact that they were asking for their rights. There's a concrete example of that. In 1944, after the Second World War, General Charles de Gaulle decided to disband the African or Senegalese Tirailleurs Corps. They were to go into transit camps before going back to their respective villages, towns, and so join their families. Well, they were promised that they would be paid before being sent home. Well, it happened that as these soldiers were going into transit camps, they were not being paid. And so in this one particular camp called Thiaroye, a massacre occurred because the soldiers said, you know what, we will not go home until we are paid our dues, just like their French compatriots. So they decided to resist and not go home. They said, we will not go until you pay us our dues. So they resisted. Well, how did the French army respond? They sent troops and surrounded the camp. So on the morning of December 1st, 1944, French troops opened up fire on those unarmed Senegalese tirailleurs. So they had machine guns, they even had a tank. But these people who were protesting for their due pay ended up being shot in cold blood. So that was a massacre, and it has become known today as the Massacre of Thiaroye. Thiaroye was essentially a transit military camp not too far outside of Dakar in Senegal. An estimated about 30 to 75 unarmed black soldiers were massacred by the French army. Well, later the French army would categorize that event as a mutiny that had to be turned off. So they considered that a mutiny, but later it became known as a massacre. But anyhow, so that was a concrete example of how these soldiers gave their lives or were sacrificing, but were never really recognized. There's also another fact. These soldiers were not allowed to get their pension unless they agreed to relocate from their African countries and relocate to France for about 6 months every year. So that was a condition in order for them to get their pension. So they had to live 6 months out of the year, relocate from their country. That was the only condition to get their pension. And even when they received it, it was much less than the soldiers who served with them. And so many activists had been fighting over time to have that requirement removed, because if these soldiers have fought for France, why did they need to leave their respective countries just to be paid the money that they were due, their pension, just like their fellow white French soldiers? Finally, just at the start of this year, the French government finally decided to eliminate that requirement. So as of now, the Tirailleurs veterans will be able to receive their pension without having to come back to France. So that's a little bit of a victory, although activists are still complaining that these veterans will still not receive the same pay as their French comrades. And even though this is a bit of a victory, according to the French Office of Veteran Affairs, there's only about 40 of these Tirailleurs veterans that are registered today. So out of the hundreds of thousands of Tirailleurs that had served for France, they are actually forcefully conscripted into France. The French army, only about 40 are listed today. So those are the ones that will be able to receive their pension. All right, so that was the history piece about the French Tirailleurs, or the Senegalese Tirailleurs. I like to say the African Tirailleurs because they had soldiers from multiple African countries and not just Senegal. Let's move on to the controversy, so to speak. So Omar Sy, just as a reminder, in case you might wonder who's Omar Sy, this is one of the most popular actors in France. Okay, he's the guy who brought movies such as Les Intouchables, The Untouchable. I think it was back in 2011. And in America, a remake was also made of that movie in English. So he's a very popular, thriving actor. He was in one of the latest Jurassic Park movies as well. Well, as he was promoting his movie, he was invited by the French newspaper magazine Le Parisien to give an interview. In the interview, he was talking, and so he was asked about the Ukraine war. If he's shocked by what's happening, essentially his sentiments about the destruction, the human destruction that is being caused by Russia and Ukraine. Well, he gave his sentiments, which were humane, but ended up causing a massive controversy. So what exactly did he say? And here I'm going to read the quote of what his response was. Okay, so this is an English translation of his French response. So here's what he said, quote, "A war is humanity sinking, even when it's on the other side of the world. We remember that man is capable of invading, of attacking civilians, children. We have the impression that we have to wait for Ukraine to realize this. Oh, friends, I have seen this since I was little. When it's far away, we say to ourselves that over there are savages. We don't do that anymore. Like COVID, at the beginning, we said it's only the Chinese." End quote. So that was his response with regards to his sentiment. But then he said the sentence that seemed to have broken the dam and caused a volcanic eruption. So what was the sentence in question? Well, the controversial sentence was that he said, "When it is in Africa, are you less affected?" Yes, you heard that right. So the sentence that caused all the controversy was him stating that, when it's in Africa, are you less affected? So his whole thing was that there is less coverage for wars that have occurred for a long time in Africa, right? But also there's a sentiment that it is not as important to the Ukraine war. So in my sense, here, the major sin that Omar Sy committed was that he brought up African matters on the same level, essentially, as European matters, when he compared that to the Ukraine war. If you're being rational in your read his statement, he never denied the humanity, the human destruction occurring in Ukraine. As a matter of fact, he recognized it. And he was a little bit depressed. His point here was that destruction is occurring, but it's occurring in many different places. He mentioned that unfortunately, his family, and he's experiencing that since he was little. It seems like he was always surrounded by wars. As a matter of fact, he brought up other wars in the Middle East as well. So he never questioned the humanity of the destruction caused in Ukraine. He never said that it was not a negative thing. As a matter of fact, he recognized that. What he simply seemed to allude to was the fact that when the conflict happens in Africa, it is getting less coverage. And so it's as if people are less sensitized to that. And let's be honest, that is the truth. The mainstream media channels do not cover conflicts in Africa with the same energy, the same expediency as the coverage of the war in Ukraine. So he didn't say anything out of the ordinary. But out of the blue, somebody went from being one of the most popular person in France to now people questioning his authentic Frenchness. You even have the most extreme segment of the French society calling for him to be sent back to his African continent. Can you imagine? It is very ironic to me, even though I understand it, but it is ironic that a country that prides itself to have brought les lumières, which means the light, right, to the world, a country that wants to advertise itself as the beacon of freedom, ends up crucifying this actor for statements that he made. It is, a paradox. He made statements about that. Had he condemned or had he belittled the destruction, I would have understood, all right? Because let's be frank, human destruction is human destruction. But I think he is correct in just wanting people to be sensitized the same way. When you have African refugees, they deserve the same sympathy as refugees from Ukraine. Are they less human? I think not. And for him bringing up that, he is being crucified. Which is why I was saying, the sin that he committed is simply bringing up African matters here when discussing these European matters and trying to put them on the same level playing field, when in other people's mind, they should not be on the same playing field. That is what he's being crucified for. So in a sense, as I mentioned before, I am really not surprised by this, okay? This, in my opinion, is just a reoccurrence of the same racist theme that always seems to rear up its head, okay? And this is just associated with the perception of Africa. So in essence, the vitriol that you saw, the attacks that Omar Sy was being subjected to were actually attacks targeted at the image of Africa. So he was a proxy for Africa in essence, because the accusation that he was getting essentially had to do with the African continent. And the only way this will change is for Africa to start building and communicating a stronger image to the outside world. And so this leads me to the last part of this video. As I mentioned before, this platform is really not about just pointing the finger. It's not about just accusing or justifying. We strongly believe in advancing. It's about giving solutions, showing the way forward, because at the end of the day, it's about building a stronger and more prosperous Africa for the benefit of Africans, but also humanity. And so what Omar Sy said about the coverage, he is right, okay? Mainstream news media outlets tend to cover certain conflicts more than others, but there's nothing surprising here. You have to understand the incentive. These mainstream media outlets are funded by certain corporations, certain governments that are not Africans. And there's a certain agenda that has to be put forth. And so, especially when we deal with geopolitical conflicts and geopolitical relationships or issues, well, there's a certain narrative that has to be advanced. And so the forces behind these media outlets will ensure that a certain narrative is put forth so that public opinion is guided or influenced in a certain way. For all the talks about independence that the news media can claim, it is clearly not the case. The BBCs of the world, the CNN of the world, the France 24, Fox News, the Euronews, you name it. I mean, these are powerful entities that are funded by strong economic entities, but also governments, subsidized by governments. A certain agenda has to be put forward. So the only way, though, we can reverse the tendency, if we want better coverage of Africa, and we want a better image of Africa also being put forth, well, it goes without saying that Africa needs to become stronger. We need a strong Africa, period. We need a strong Africa, strong politically, strong economically, strong culturally, and communicate that. So Africa needs to quickly organize, and it is an urgent matter. Africa and its diaspora. Yes, Africa need to urgently organize. And when I talk about Africa, I want to make something clear. I am talking about continental Africans on the continent, continental Africans outside of the continent, and the entire Pan-African diaspora need to come together, mutualize resources, put efforts together in order to build a stronger Africa. Because guess what? This will be for the benefit of not only continental Africans, but also the entire Pan-African diaspora globally. As a matter of fact, a stronger Africa will be for the benefit of humanity. And a stronger Africa will fundamentally change the relationships, the discussions, the coverage when it comes to Africa and the outside world. As far as AfriKili is concerned, we'll continue doing our part. And we'll continue doing it by focusing on our three pillars, which, as I mentioned before, Pan-African history, Pan-African business, and Pan-African political action. Because we believe that Pan-African history is important because it allows us to disseminate education. And through that knowledge, it will allow us to avoid mistakes of the past. It will allow us to understand how we got to where we are today, and it will allow us to build a better future by avoiding mistakes of the past. Why is Pan-African business important? Well, there's no other way around it. Africa will never maximize its potential without financial resources. Well, the continent has all that's needed, but the continent and its diaspora needs to take control of its financial resources in order to determine its economic destiny. And so as AfriKili, we'll continue supporting and highlighting Pan-African business initiative and causing calls of action for more of us to be involved in taking control of the continent's economic destiny. Finally, why is Pan-African political action important? Well, there's no other way to put this, but political systems are a fundamental determinant of where societies are. And so if we want to build the future that we want, we need to take control of our political systems, drive political action to build that future. It will not happen by itself. And there's a saying that says people get the leaders that they deserve. And so it is up to Africans, continental Africans, and the Pan-African diaspora to reshape the political systems to put Africa on a rising path. It is possible. And so there you have it. Those are our focuses, and that's what AfriKili will continue doing in advancing that mission. Because again, I've said it twice and I'll say it a third time. This platform does not want to point a finger and accuse. This platform wants to advance. Before concluding, first I'd like to thank you. Thank you for your support. And I'd also like to hear your point of view. Obviously, nobody has the monopoly of knowledge. I do not have all the knowledge. Some of you will agree with me. Some will disagree with me, which is fine. It is when ideas clash that the light appears. So let me know what you think. Send your comments to the various profiles where this video will be posted. I'd like to hear your comments, or feel free to send emails. I want to hear your voice really on this topic, because as this platform grows, it has to become an interactive platform as to where we grow from each other's point of view. So yeah, and of course, if you like our work, feel free to like our videos, our content. Please share it to your network, to other people that might see value in this. And very importantly, include your email on our blog online, www.afrikili.com, so you may get notification of the written blog, because some of you prefer reading. You can get that through the website. So there you have it. 2023 is upon us. I'm very excited at the prospect of this year. There's a lot that has been in the work. A lot will be coming your way. Stay tuned. But until then, AfriKili, African intelligence to build a better, stronger, and more prosperous Africa. Until next time, AfriKili Nation, peace be with you.